Hey there, not your average goat listeners. If you're listening to this, I bet you love Tisha, and I bet you're inspired by all of the incredible people she features on her show. Of course you are. I can't help but wondering, though, what you're doing, or maybe what you're avoiding doing that makes you a goat. My name's Megan, and I host the More Than Anxiety podcast, where I help ambitious, creative, brilliant people break that cycle of overthinking and feeling anxious so they can get unstuck and become their amazing selves. Every Tuesday, I'm bringing you insightful and fun conversations, actionable steps and interviews, and a lot of truth talk. So whether you've been anxious your entire life or not, the More Than Anxiety podcast has something for you. I'll help you think differently about anxiety, challenge yourself, and laugh along the way. Subscribe to the More Than Anxiety podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and find me all over social media at Coach Megan DeVito. I'll see you there.
Hi there, welcome to Not Your Average Goat. I'm your host, Tisha Gillespie, and this is a show that celebrates all the shapes, sizes, and colors of diversity as well as adversity. Through authentic conversations, we hope to have an impact on dismantling societal stigma while creating a place for relatable storytelling. Well, thank you so much for carving out some time and being willing to come on the show. You are actually my first interview that I've ever done where I haven't spoken with the guest beforehand. So I like challenges. So maybe this will teach me a thing or two. Bryan, the first question that I always ask everyone is kind of this time traveling journey, because I really like to go back and see if there are any dotted lines between who people are currently today and maybe who you were at like 7, 8 years old. So if you think back on 7, 8-year-old Bryan, what do you remember about him? Like your personality, your interest, and do you see any connections to the person you are today?
Wow, 7, 8-year-old Brian was angry and sad, and I characterize that period of my life as doing without. Right, there were so many things that I did not have. Health challenges, so I didn't have the best health situation. We didn't always have the best or a lot of food, money, clothes, you name it. And so I was mad. Pretty much felt like I had a raw deal or a bad deal, so to speak. And, I just wanted something better for myself. And I make a correlation today because I was able to channel that anger, channel that feeling of, disparity and, hunger and all that kind of thing to help me do well in life, right? To stay on a path, because my desire, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, was rooted in knowing something better than what I knew at that time. And so there is a strong connection between 8-year-old Bryan and 54-year-old Bryan, right? And some of those things today still guide me in the things that I do and how I try to help others and things of that nature.
Yeah, I definitely I can understand how challenging that can be being a kid and maybe wishing that you had been dealt a different set of cards. I know we're going to get into your specific experience very shortly, but I also, growing up in a household with 7 children, raised by a mostly single mother, and really not having an income, a regular income coming in, there's definitely a lot of hoping for more, but also feeling really sad that things were the way they were sometimes. And you, as you mentioned, you grew up in Tennessee, Knoxville, in the projects. Could you kind of paint us a picture? Like, what did home and family life look for you, and how did this community kind of shape your upbringing?
99% of everyone living in that community, lived in poverty. So, we all had that in common. So in many ways, it was a very tough community, but we had a community, right? You could borrow a piece of bread from a neighbor and make a sandwich if you needed to. You could borrow some sugar to bake a cake or a pie or something if you needed to do something like that. Most of the household were single parent women raising one or more children and things of that nature. So, it taught me a lot. It taught me tenacity, how to stay the course. And as I say, the young people these days, my life was pretty much like riding a bicycle or learning how to ride a bicycle. When you learn how to ride a bicycle, you go from somebody holding that back seat for you and, trying to help you learn how to balance and pedal and brake and all those things. And they run with you for a while and they let you go, and inevitably you fall. But most of the time, 99% of young people get back on the bike and they keep learning. No matter how many times they fall, they keep getting back up and getting back on that bike until they learn. And eventually, they're popping wheelies and they're riding with no hands, and they got their friends on the handlebars and stuff like that, right? And so that's what life in Longsdale was like. You started out in a very, very, very humbling state. Just being there was humbling. And then eventually you grow, you learn some coping strategies, you learn some ways to make life a little more enjoyable or tolerable for yourself and your family members. And hopefully over time you get to that place to where you ascend from those projects and life a little better than what you were born into.
Are there any specific memories for you that still stand out today?
Oh, absolutely. Um, Quite a few. I was born with prune belly syndrome. I had one working kidney, so I had some health challenges. Those memories and some of my first surgeries and things of that nature stand out pretty painfully. But most of all, in terms of pain, there was a Christmas, 1978, when I didn't get anything for Christmas. I'm telling you, not even a pack of bubble gum, nothing. That hurt, right? And it hurt pretty bad when you see all the kids in the neighborhood having their new toys or clothes or whatever it is that they got for Christmas, and you didn't get anything. And that kind of stuck with me all my life. I've known some pretty wonderful Christmases now that I've been married for 23 years, wonderfully married with my wife and our two boys. But I can recall 1978 without anybody saying a thing to me. But I also had some really, good memories. I had my first surgery that I could remember when I was about 11 years old. And my mother she promised me that when I came home from the hospital, she would make me some New York cream cheesecake with the cherry topping. And I had never had it before. And when I was in the hospital recovering from the surgery, it was Christmas 1981. So I was in the hospital that whole week. And sure enough, true to her word, when we got home, I want to tell you one of the first things that she did was make me that cheesecake with the cherry topping. And I just thought, the world couldn't get any better. So I got some pretty good memories. I got some painful ones as well. I carry a lot of what I've learned and who I am with me, stemming from that time in those housing projects for sure.
I don't know if this is your biological father or your stepfather, but I know that he was involved with some, criminal behavior while you were growing up. How did that come into your life and impact you directly? What do you remember from growing up and your father's impact?
Yeah, my father was always into something, right? From the
Mhm.
time that I was born to the time that he died about, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. He was shot twice, once by the police in 1977, and then once to end his life in 2012. So he stayed into something, but he always tried to give me advice. And I tell you, advice that he never followed, right?
Yeah.
Things that he never did, but he'd call me from prison or something and say, don't do this, don't do that, and how you doing in school, and you better not get in trouble, you better not come to this prison or any prison for that matter, and that kind of stuff. And I'd go see him from time to time with my grandmother, his mother. He was a good motivator, very thin, slim kind of guy, but mean as a rattlesnake, right? I mean, just tough, you didn't mess with him too quick. And he managed to always talk to me about staying on the right side of the law. And those things, in many ways, were priceless. Priceless. I guess he didn't have to call at all, right? I guess he didn't have to offer any advice, but he did. And somewhere deep inside, I was listening.
Yeah, I bet he probably saw you and saw what his potential could have been and was hoping that for you in the future. So it sounds like he was a really good dad in terms of wanting you to be better and wanting you to have a better life than he did.
He definitely wanted me to have a better life than he did. He had
Mhm.
life in prison from the time he
Yeah.
was from the time I was 7 years old to the time I was 20, 24, 25, maybe. He got out when they abolished the law that convicted him for running from the police. And so he got paroled in 94, 95, somewhere around there. And he stayed out a little while and eventually went back, and then got out and stayed a while, and then eventually got killed. So, you know, he was in and out quite frequent. He was out on parole.
Hmm.
And back in those days, in 1977, Tennessee had a fleeing felon law. If a person had been previously convicted of a felony and they were on parole, and the police wanted to talk to you, you basically had no rights, and you couldn't run, you couldn't refuse, and that kind of thing. And he ran. Why he ran, I have no earthly idea, but he ran, and they shot him, and they blew his right leg off at the knee.
Oh
And
my
so he
God.
lived the rest of his life. I think he was 63, I think, when he died. And he lived all that time with one leg. 35 years he lived with one leg.
I can't believe that was a law, or and that was the response to it. That's very cool. That's very
Yeah.
cool.
And the running from the police
Yeah.
that got his leg blew off was his third felony. That was considered a felony, to run from the police. He didn't do anything but run. That was his felony.
Mhm.
And that gave him a third strike and life in prison because he ran.
So, Bryan, you had an incredible career in higher education, 30 years. But going back to your own educational journey as a child, I know that you had some barriers that you personally had to overcome. And so I'm wondering, can you walk us through what did some of those barriers look like? How did you navigate them? Was having a disability a big barrier for you? Was growing up in the type of environment that you did a big barrier for you? Just give us some insight into what those things look like and how they ultimately shaped your own perspective of the value of education.
My parents never went to college and what have you. They went to high school and they went to inner city schools just like me, right? So between family and education, there's always been this disconnect, particularly because of where we lived in the school systems and things of that nature. And I might say that, just the landscape, the civil landscape of the times, right? Prior to 1964 and before that, the Brown versus Board of Topeka, Kansas decisions, education wasn't something um, that was just readily available for certainly poor Black people in these United States. And we were both poor and Black, living in the project. So that was a challenge, just being born into the situation that we had. But speaking of the disabilities, that was a challenge as well. I had kidney problems, And anytime I need to use the restroom, there was always you're faking, or this is not normal, right? And if I let you go, I gotta let everybody else go. So you gotta use the bathroom on yourself and prove it. That kind of thing. Um, First grade wasn't bad because we had a restroom right there in the classroom. But from second grade on, it was a nightmare getting people to just to respect the boundaries of health and the needs of a student individually speaking, that is. So that was a bit of an issue. And then, like all the other kids in Longsdale, we had to walk to school and deal with some of the challenges of being poor kids in inner city schools and stuff like that. So it's a lot. It's a lot to overcome. And looking back on it, it's real easy to understand how um, how a lot of our classmates didn't make it, right? Because the environment itself wasn't set up for success. It was set up for failure.
Yeah.
I walked 2 miles to school every day for 3 years in middle school, 2 miles. And I walked 2 miles there and 2 miles back, no matter whether it was raining or whether it was hot, you know, uh, sleet, hail, it didn't matter. You had to walk to school. And, that's a problem. That's a problem. That's a real good reason for why a lot of students didn't make it to school every day. You got 2 miles of walking to think about something else to do, right? Or
Yeah.
to come up with something else or somewhere else you'd rather be every day. And, that's before the weather and other things get, factored into it. And if it's raining, every now and again, a car would come by and splash you. And, by the time you get to school, you started out clean and dressed as well as you could for that day. And by the time you get there, you look like you've been swimming, you know, maybe even got some muddy water on you from where a car came by and intentionally or otherwise splashed you or something. So it was a lot. But like I said, a lot of us went through it and we survived. I got a buddy visiting me from Detroit, Michigan this weekend, and we just went to my office and toured the campus and that kind of stuff. And he's telling me how proud he is of me because coming up the way we did, right? We didn't really have a lot of male role models and some of these other kind of things that would suggest that he and I and many of our other childhood friends could be where we are today. But we made it, we made it. And some went to college, some went to the military, some learned trades and crafts and, did their own thing that way. We made it though. We sure did.
Yeah, you definitely did. Those challenges though, they're so deep rooted and they're very much systemic. You should at least get a pass on having to take gym if you're walking 4 miles a day. But but no
Yeah.
child should have to walk 4 miles round trip in the rain, in the snow, in 100-degree weather. It's not healthy.
Equality was the last thing on people's mind. And you got to
Yeah.
keep in mind, we were only, let's see, 64 and 74, right? So
Mhm.
by 74, I'm not in school yet, but 75, 76, I'm in school. So we were only like 10 years out of, the civil rights era, right? And so um, to think that there was going to be mass equality and equity and things of that nature, it just wasn't the case. And you mentioned hot. Um, we were suspended for wearing shorts. We couldn't wear shorts in middle school, junior high school. We couldn't. The teacher and the principals said that, boys and girls wearing shorts and mini skirts or things of that nature was problematic because we get frisky with each other or something. And many cases, Most of the time, there would not be any air conditioning. And remember, we went to school up until like middle of June, right? Because you didn't go back until after Labor Day in September. So we might be sitting in class, it's 95 degrees, no air conditioning. And if you wear a pair of shorts, you get suspended. If you came to class or school and you self-medicated some Tylenol because your head was hurting or any other reason why you might take a Tylenol, you could be suspended for that too. Yeah. So it was definitely systemic. A lot of things in place to almost ensure that you would not graduate. And more often than not, you didn't even want to bother. You didn't even want to come. You didn't even want to have to deal with that. Talking without raising your hand or getting permission. Oh, please, they sooner suspend you or put you out of school than, sit there and watch you or try to stop you from doing it. But again, that was, 70s, 80s, right? That was 40, 50 something years ago. And, things were very, very different than they are today.
Welcome to Weirdsdale.
Are you a weirdster like us?
Do you love the paranormal, true crime, mysteries, and stories of the just plain weird?
We're sisters, Melissa
and Stephanie.
One of us is obsessed with telling the other every weird story she can find. Every week on our show, Weirdsdale, we have a story that's sure to leave you wondering.
You might even let out a, welp.
Join us in Weirdsdale every Thursday for a new episode of Sisters Speculating on the Strange.
Find us in your podcast app and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Weirdsdale Podcast.
And TikTok at Weirdsdale Pod.
What's weird with you?
Given all of these barriers that you had to deal with, was that drive to go to college, was that always within you, or was there some kind of pivotal moment or experience that you had that changed things for you?
There was the pivotal moment. One of my buddies robbed an old man, and my mother came to me and asked me what I was going to do with my life and encouraged me to find something to do with my life. She said, you're young, you're handsome, you're smart, you can do a lot in this world. I don't want you in prison like your father. I don't want you shot dead in the street like other kids or, it's happening all over the country. Find something to do. And because that friend robbed somebody, my mother had a conversation with me, and that conversation with me sparked me to start looking for exit opportunities and exit strategies, from that situation that we were born into, right? Happenstance of being Black and poor. Mm-hmm. And so the next day when I go to school, one of my friends tell me there's an admissions counselor there. Her name was Andrea Dubo. She's actually a cousin, a distant cousin. And she tells me, hey, Bryan, there's an admission counselor downstairs. And so I go to my second period teacher and I asked her if I could go hear what the admission counselor had to say. And she said, Bryan, I didn't know you were thinking about college. And I said, Miss Beatty, her name was Leroyce Beatty. I said, I don't know anything about college, but I'd love to hear what he has to say. And so I went down there and he's telling me about the majors and the minors and concentrations and all this kind of thing, sports and athletics, ball games, basketball, football, what have you, Greek life, fraternity, sororities, all the stuff that you experience at a college or university. And then he got to talking about how people fared when they graduated with at least a bachelor's degree. And I think he said, my recollection is that he said you could make $30,000 or $40,000 a year. And when he said that, I'm washing dishes at $3 an hour, right? So anything that purported to earn $30,000 or $40,000 a year had my undivided attention, and it's legal. I don't have to go to jail to do it, Mm-hmm. So, so I decided after listening to him His name was George Conley. He was an admissions counselor for the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. I decided after listening to him that I would go to college. And it just so happens that I took the ACT and I made a 12. And every college I applied to denied my admissions, saying that I would never graduate and it wouldn't be fair to me to admit me knowing I'd never graduate. They didn't want me to get a lot of loans and waste my money or waste the government's money or all those things, because there's no way I could be successful at that college. And so that went on and on and on and on until finally I got a letter telling me pretty much the same thing, that I'd never graduate. But it said if I wanted to, I could appeal that decision. And so one day, the following day after getting that letter, which I read over the trash, by the way, because I was sure it was a letter of no thank you, I went to the library and I looked up the word appeal and saw that it meant that I could ask for reconsideration or apply again. And that's what I did. And I talked about the systems and barriers that we discussed earlier. And I talked about some of the other kind of things that were reasons why, my ACT score, a 12, we didn't learn about Shakespeare and Socrates and Plato and things of that nature, Zeus and whatnot, right? Greek mythology and some of those things that they were asking on the ACT test. So, I wrote that letter, and maybe a couple of weeks later, they admitted me on probation. I entered the campus in 1988 on academic probation under the threat of expulsion if I did not earn at least a 1.0 grade point average. So while the rest of the campus would have a year, 2 years, 3 years to flunk out, right? I had one semester, equivalent of 120 days, to earn at least a 1.0 GPA, or I'd be put out forever, never to return. So I did pretty well that first semester, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, you do go to college and you do very well. And you not only get your bachelor's, but you actually go on to get your master's and then your PhD, which is so incredible. But your first degree was in criminal justice. What kind of motivated you to go in that direction initially?
I actually entered the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga in 1988 as an accounting major, accountancy. I was going to study business accounting. And I took my first ever exam in college, first ever, with Dr. Bruce Hutchison. And I made a 32 F plus on the curve. A 34 was a D minus on his curve. And that scared me. I was already on probation, remember, right? So I looked at that F plus and I pulled out my calculator and I said, well, gee, if I made straight A's on everything from here on out, what do I have to do just to pass this class? And I figured I needed straight A's, and starting from a 32 F plus, I was not likely to get that. And so I went and I got up in the middle of that class and I went and I dropped that class, and the lady at the registrar's office said, well, you're going to have to major in something, and you can't do accounting if you're not going to take economics, excuse me. And so what are you going to study? And I really hadn't thought about it, right? And she said, well, let me ask you this way. What is it that you would like to know just for the sake of learning? Don't think about it as doing a job later, but just knowing something. What would that be? And I said, I like to know my rights and what the police can and cannot do when they see me. And you'll remember they shot my father for running. And in the housing projects, they used to do these things called bum rush, where they just jump out and round up all the black men and carry us to jail. And if you got caught, you went to jail. If you did not run, you went to jail. So you were going to jail whether you ran or not, right? After they checked your ID and who you were and saw whether you had a warrant or not or something like that, they eventually let you go. But who wants to go to jail to go through all that and do it, 2 or 3, 4 times a year, So I wanted to know my rights. And she told me about criminal justice, a major that looks at all the different amendments of the law and, civil rights and human rights and codified statutes and that kind of thing in the state of Tennessee. And so I said, sign me up. I was not planning on getting a master's. I finished my bachelor's degree in the spring of 1993, and I was working at a psychiatric facility called Reflections in Knoxville, Tennessee, when a guy named Thaddeus Clark said, Bryan, you need to go back to school and get you a master's degree. And I said, man, I don't know about no masters. He said, you see those people over there? I said, yeah. He said, how much you think they make? I said, I don't know. He said, they make $35,000 a year. Now, how much do you make? At that time, I was making $19,000 a year. And he said, they make almost double what you make because they got a master's degree. So you need to go back to school and get a master's. And I said, man, I ain't trying to write a thesis. And he said, a thesis ain't nothing but, a big old research paper. How many research papers did you do to get a bachelor's? So you did 50 research papers to get a bachelor's. You can't do one to get a thesis, one, right? To get a master's, excuse me. And then I said, well, I ain't got any way to pay. Well, they got assistantships and fellowships and different kind of ways you can pay. Well, I don't know my test scores. I don't do well on tests. And he said, man, you keep making up these reasons, but everything you say is something else out there to kind of counteract whatever it is that you say. Don't be scared. Just get back on the highway, go back to where you came from, where they already got your transcripts and, your grade point average and all that stuff. And they can make a decision a lot quicker than some other schools will. And some people down there, so you might be able to utilize some of your resources to kind of make this happen. And so that's what I did. I went back and started grad school and applied for an assistantship and got it. And when I applied for admission first time for grad school, I got denied. And then the second time they let me in. And so I finished that in 95 and started a job in 95, and boss called me up and asked me, Dr. Irvin Griffin called me up and asked me about getting a doctorate. And I told him I wasn't thinking about getting a master's, even though I had one, right? It really wasn't something on my radar. And so he asked me what I wanted to do with my career. I said, well, one day I wouldn't mind being like you, a vice president or something. He said, well, I thought that might be the case. But let me tell you, if you don't go get a Ph.D., you ain't never going to have a job like this one. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, you ain't never going to have a job like this one if that's what you want, not without a Ph.D. And so I started pursuing it. And every school I applied to turned me down. And even when I got to Nebraska, where I eventually got the doctorate, they turned me down too, saying I could not write a dissertation and it wouldn't be fair to let me in and all that kind of stuff. And so finally, after I got there and I took a couple of classes and I applied again, and the second time they let me in and I went on and finished my doctorate.
What drove you to kind of change your path when it came to your career?
I thought I was going to be in criminal justice, maybe probation, parole, or working with juveniles really was my plan. And it just so happened they had the Financial Aid Reauthorization Act, I want to say in 1994. And, it was going to change how students got financial aid and what they lost and that kind of stuff. And I was telling the administration they need to make sure students knew and understood this. And they said, well, we send them letters and we call them and ask them to come in and nobody's responding. And I said, well, do a workshop and I'll make sure everybody get there. And he said, what you mean you'll make sure? I said, I'll make sure everybody be there. And he said, don't waste my time. I said, you do one more workshop, I'll get them there. And so I went all around campus telling everybody. frat houses, sorority houses, Christian Student Union, Baptist Student Union, you name it. If there was a student organization, I went there and I told them all about the impending changes and how everybody needed to be there. And by the time we got to that program, it was standing room only. I mean, the temperature went up like 25 degrees or something. There was so many people in that room. And when it was all said and done, I'm on my way, walking out the door, and Dr. Mike Roberts, he was our director of financial aid at the time. He said, "Hey, not you." And the way he said it, I thought I was in trouble, right? He said, "You come here," And so I went over there scared to death. Here's this big doctor of education and administration and director of financial aid telling me, you come here. And I get over there and I'm like, huh? What's wrong? I didn't do nothing wrong. And he said, no, you didn't do anything wrong. He said, how did you get all these students here? I said, oh, I just made it relevant to them. He said, made it relevant? What does that mean? I said, I told them that if they didn't come and learn about the changes in the financial aid and they lose their money, they got their own selves to blame. I made it cultural. I made it economical. I did whatever I had to do to strike that chord with each individual student to get them to say, oh, I need to go there. Even if I don't go to work that day for my $3.25 an hour job, I need to go hear what this man gonna say about this financial aid, right? And like I said, it was standing room only. We had planned to be there for an hour, and we ended up being there for about 3 hours. And he told me, he said, we need people like you in higher education. And when I went to work the next day, my boss told me, Bryan, I heard you missed your calling. And I'm like, what does that mean? And said, well, you had all those students come to the thing, and you helped them know that it was important, and they came, said we could use somebody like you working in higher education to help reach students. And that's how I switched from going back to juvenile centers and juvenile justice to higher education, and I've been there ever since.
What a cool feeling, though, that must have been for you to, have the confidence to know that, hey, I'm going to do this and I'm telling you I'm going to accomplish this. You better believe me. And then to deliver on it. And then to get that reinforcement and say, we need people like you, Bryan. We need you to come in and do this. And you have a place in this world. Like that must have felt really good.
Yeah, it was pretty nice actually, to hear somebody validate that there's a niche that I might be able to fulfill. But listen, having that job put me in that position to be able to do that. And I went from washing dishes, busting tables, mopping floors, cleaning bathrooms. When Outcast say every job I get is cruel and demeaning, he was talking about my life. Okay. And you listen to Outcast at all?
No,
Huh?
I don't.
Okay. Okay. Well, they're R&B rap hip hop group, and that song is called "Get Up, Get Out, and Get Something." And anyway, the one of the characters on the song says every job he get is cruel and demeaning, and that's the way my life was up until that time, cruel and demeaning. And when I got that job, all of a sudden I had an office. I had a little desk and a computer and a printer and a telephone with my own extension line and stuff. And so life was, starting to change for me.
So since 2000, you've actually worked for several different universities and, university systems in diversity, equity, and inclusion leadership roles, really helping to impact student recruitment and legal compliance and workforce diversity and even policy development too. When you think about the career that you've had since getting into the higher education space, what are some of those most significant initiatives that you worked on that you're proud of or that have been really big, and what have been some of the results from those?
Just being able to help students graduate. And, that may have meant one thing for one student and something else for another student. I was at Miami, Ohio for 4 years, and one of those students, I don't know if you keep up with pro football. You know anything about pro football?
Oh, I know a lot about pro football.
You have a team?
Oh, I'm Baltimore Ravens all the way.
Okay, well, the Baltimore Ravens have a arch enemy in the Pittsburgh Steelers, right?
They do.
Okay, well, Pittsburgh Steelers have a Hall of Fame quarterback that won 2 Super Bowls,
Are you talking about Roethlisberger?
Roethlisberger. Do
We call
you
him Rottingberger here in the DMV area.
okay? Do you know who admitted Benjamin Roethlisberger to Miami University and who was his advisor his first year?
Were you?
Yours truly.
Oh my gosh. Well, I hope I didn't offend you by calling him Rottingberger.
Oh, no, he may not even remember me, but I definitely remember him. And I also remember helping him get graduated when he went to uh, Pittsburgh to play pro football, and the university would not let him finish his degree because they had a policy on the books that you had to do your last 30 hours at that university.
Mhm.
And so my colleagues who were there with me, by that time I had left for Nebraska, and they called me and said, "Well, hey man, what should we do? What kind of strategy can we come up with to get this done?" And I said, "Well, listen, let me talk to the registrars." And registrar was a nice lady by the name of D. Roush, right? And I said, "D, how you doing?" And she said, "I'm doing fine. How things going out there in Nebraska?" We had a little small talk. And I said, "Life is good. And I'm calling you about Ben." And she said, "Bryan, you don't even work here anymore." I said, "No, I don't. But, I'm still a part of the community, and I'm still an advocate for students and that kind of thing." "He ain't a student here no more." "No, he's not. He's not. But you know what he is? He's an alumni." "Yeah, buddy, he's an alumni. And when he get out there in pro football and he's throwing that ball around and scoring touchdowns and what have you, I guarantee you one day somebody from the alumni office going to call that man and ask him for some money." They're going to do it. They're going to pick up that phone. They're going to call him. They're going to ask him for some money. And he may not be inclined to give it. Not because he didn't enjoy his time at the university, but he don't appreciate the way these policies are keeping him in a box, right? Um, and I said, I get that the last 30 credit hours got to be done on the campus at the university. I really understand that for 99% of people. But every now and again, there's going to be somebody for whom that doesn't work, that we have to, do everything we can to kind of make things work for the students in the way that they need them. He's a pro football player. He's making $1 million a year, probably 10 or 20 million. I don't know what it was, but it was a lot of money. And I said, "So when do you want him to come to school? In the fall? That's football season. You want him to come in the spring? That's playoffs, right?" I said, "You want him to come in the summer? That's,
Training
OTL.
camp. Hmm.
That's training camp, right? So when is this man supposed to give up this, $20 million a year job that he has to come and take 3 or 4 classes so he can eventually finish his last 30 credit hours and get a bachelor's degree? When is he supposed to do that?" I said, "I tell you what, if you'll let him do it at the University of Pittsburgh, which is very close to where he's living, and transfer him back to the University of Miami, he can probably finish this degree in 2 years, taking 2 classes here or there, you know, and that's what they agreed to do." So I said all that. My greatest accomplishments are those little things that I've been able to do to help students get into school, to get scholarships, to get, become doctors and lawyers and preachers and teachers and almost anything that they had on their minds. And I say that because that's what I had to do. right? I had to I had to jump through those hurdles and thread those needles and sidestep the landmines so that I could go to school, so that I could graduate. And so I really relish those that lived experiences that I had that uh, trained me for this battleground of how to say, what to say, and to whom to say it so that the message could be received and understood, right? And that a good decision could come from that message. So I've done scholarships, I've done any number of programs to bring students to a campus, I've done uh, residential programs, you name it. I can go on and on and on with the different kind of things that I've done, but or been a part of with any number of colleagues and other administrators and what have you. But yeah, I'm most proud of all the doctors and professional parties that are out there, and even one or two who didn't graduate, but they decided that they didn't need to graduate, but they start their own business or something like that. And I got a student in Cleveland, Ohio. She owns her own hair care product lines, and she's a millionaire. I got a student in Florida. He's in real estate, and he sells these $1 million homes and all that kind of stuff. And I admitted him to school. I advised him all the way through school and helped him get his bachelor's degree in a program that they never admitted him to. They never admitted him to school in that program. And I said, listen, his name is Raymond Robber, and Rauber. And I said, Raymond, we are going to get you that degree. And he had done all the requirements. He had met all the requirements. He had passed all the classes. But because his GPA and test scores weren't where they needed to be when he came in as a freshman, they never admitted him to the major. But he was allowed to take those classes. And when he took the classes, he passed them all. I said, yeah, we're going to figure something out and we're going to get you this degree. And sure enough, we were able to talk to the registrar, talk to the dean of the College of Business, and he eventually graduated with a bachelor's in business. So those are the things that I'm most proud of.
Yeah, really helping or being there to partner with the students to help them see their potential and help them navigate all the hurdles that they need to in order to actually be successful in life and set them up for financial success. Because ultimately that's, it's not necessarily about the dollars, but it is about being able to support yourself and make sure you have money to pay for food and pay for housing and support your family.
Sometimes it's not even the food stuff. I mean, even if you can figure out the food, maybe you eat ramen noodles every day. You still got, you still got the policies and practices and procedures that, can trip you up, right? I actually lost a student named Isaiah, and I lost him because he took a TV from the hallway and into his dorm room. And, they said he stole it, even though the TV never left the building. Never left the building. And so they ended up putting him out of school. That's one of the stories of where I failed. I think I failed him. I tried to be there for him. And the truth of the matter is, I'd have been much better off connecting him with somebody else who knew more about the policies and practices and that kind of stuff. I wanted to be there for him, but I was not the right person. I was not the best person. I wasn't a bad person, but I wasn't the best person to be in his corner. He needed somebody else. But you win some, you lose some, you never forget them.
And you don't know what you don't know too in the moment. So you end up growing and learning all these things. But I imagine in the moment, you probably didn't know the best route to go. When you think about reaching these students and helping them succeed, do you think that policies are the biggest opportunity for higher ed institutions?
There are two things, if you ask me: policies and the willingness of instructors, faculty, administrators to value the legitimacy of diverse perspectives. Back in my time in college, we had to deal with this ideal that we could not please everybody. So we come up with one policy, and that's what it's going to be. It's going to be meatloaf and macaroni and mashed potatoes in the cafeteria on Tuesdays. And if you don't like that, tough. That was it. Now we understand that everybody don't want to eat meatloaf, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to eat mashed potatoes, and they don't want to eat macaroni and cheese. And if you don't give them another option, and I mean several options, right? Then you are properly motivating them to look somewhere else and to not choose you. That's what you're doing. You're asking them to go somewhere else. So helping decision makers understand the legitimacy of what some students and some families need for them to see themselves credibly at that university is a big piece of what I've been able to do. And it's all students. You mentioned you had a disability, and I got several. I told you about the prune belly and the kidney. I didn't tell you that I'm totally deaf in one ear, right? So helping those universities and decision makers say you can't treat everyone with a one size fit all type of deal, because one size does not fit all. What somebody needs is going to differ from one person to the next, just like a fingerprint. It's going to be different from one person to the next. And so I grew adept at helping presidents and provosts and chancellors and deans and other decision makers kind of understand some of those challenges and come up with some policies that were really, really made in the best interest of students as opposed to in the best interest of the institution. Because what you do in the best interest of students is in the best interest of the institution.
When you think about some of these pressing issues that are up against us right now, whether it be student loan forgiveness or the changes with affirmative action or classroom accessibility, is there any of those areas or another one where you gravitate toward, where you say, we need to focus on this right now? This is a big issue that needs addressing.
I think it's access, period.
Yeah.
In all its definitions, whether there's curb cuts and ramps and electronic doors and, that kind of stuff, meeting not only the folks in the margins, but, the entire community. But it's also access from the standpoint of why I can't come to the school because I made a 12 on the ACT, but this tool that you're using, this tool that you got this value, locked up in, isn't a good and appropriate measure for my background and where I'm coming from. Everybody will not do well on the test just because some people don't take tests well or they have anxiety or anything, right? So access also from, the ability to pay for stuff. I shudder to think how many people cannot or did not go to college because they didn't have the money to even pay, right? When you think about what we're doing now, you're in Virginia and I'm in Alabama, and we are able to meet and engage with each other through these technologies that, the world has made available. Well, some people can't even do that. Some people can't go to class online because, the limited Wi-Fi and technical capabilities of their community or things of that nature. So we gotta really figure out access, because that's the key. We need to make sure that if there is a young mind out there who has the ability to be an engineer, what is our role and our responsibility in making sure that young person get every opportunity to be an engineer? Because we need every engineer we can find.
I think that access is so important. No matter where you are in your educational journey, I think that's really, really valuable for us to focus on.
Hi, my wonderful GOAT fans. Thank you so much again for tuning in. You all are truly the best. If you are enjoying this episode and all the incredible people and stories you showcase on this show, I'd like to ask you to consider supporting us in 2 other ways. 5-star ratings and reviews tell platforms like Spotify and Apple that you find this content valuable and that others may too, meaning they're more likely to show it to future listeners. Secondly, we are now on Patreon. And for just $3 a month, you can help me to continue to source incredible guests and independently produce this show. Visit patreon.com/NotYourAverageGoat to consider joining us today. Again, thank you so much for being one of our greatest of all time fans.
So in 2023 or last year, you write your memoir. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what initially sparked you to actually share your story with the world?
It is everything from that not getting anything for Christmas to making the 12 on the ACT to, washing those dishes and dealing with some of those kind of challenges, busting tables and, being shamed, if you will, about how lowly life was at the time to, being in this place of accomplishment and in many ways redemption for some of the challenges and things that were put before me but didn't derail me, And I wanted to inspire somebody, particularly young people, to let them know that even though they are caterpillars today, right? Some people may say they're ugly. They want to squish them and, use them for fish bait or whatever. The fact of the matter is they go through their process. They do what they can do. They study, they prepare themselves. They have those 4 Ds, as I mentioned. They will one day emerge as a beautiful butterfly, So I just wanted to inspire people, anybody who is looking to accomplish some type of goal and maybe for whatever reason they're struggling to get something done. I think about the movie My Cousin Vinny. I don't know if you've ever watched it, but in that movie, Joe Pesci said he took the bar 6 times, right? There's a Joe Pesci Cousin Vinny in every one of us. If you got to take that bar 6 times, then you take it 6 times, right? Going back to that bicycle story, you who knows how many times you're going to fall down and scrape your knee or your elbow or something, or bump your head, or maybe even knock out a tooth. Get back on that bicycle until you defeat it, or you let it defeat you. It was a journey getting to the Ph.D. Not only was it hard getting to the bachelor's degree, the master's wasn't very challenging. It was challenging, but not nearly as hard as the bachelor's and the Ph.D. I applied 5 times to that Ph.D. 5 times. I applied to West Virginia University. I made 6 hours of straight A's and got denied. I applied to the University of Miami University in Knoxville, Ohio. I didn't take any classes there, but I got denied. I applied again to Miami, and they interviewed me. And I had a decent interview, I thought. And they looked me in my face and denied me. And then I applied to Nebraska. And I had taken 6 credit hours and I made straight A's. They denied me. And then I applied again. And by the time I got to Nebraska, Tisha, I had moved my family, which consisted of my wife, our son Austin, and my nephew, who's no longer with us, but he lived with us for 3 or 4 years out in Nebraska. I had moved across country. I'm telling you, 1,200 miles to Nebraska. On my list of places to live, Nebraska was not on there. You hear me? It was not. But I had this job opportunity. And I had an opportunity to do a free PhD if I could get into the program. I went and I did my thing. I'm doing well in class. I mean, I always I'm telling you, I always made A's in these classes. But for some reason, the A's weren't enough. Okay. The A's were not enough to get me admitted. And that bothered me, something terrible. And so they always said that I couldn't write a dissertation. I couldn't write a dissertation. Can't write a dissertation. And so the second time I applied to Nebraska, like Miami, they said they were going to interview me. So they invited me to interview, which I had come to the resolve that that interview was like Miami, an opportunity to bring me up there and tell me to my face, no, thank you. You know, and so I packed in the car. And keep in mind, I worked in one part of Nebraska called Kearney, University of Nebraska Kearney. And the University of Nebraska Lincoln was 130 miles one way. So I had to drive 130 miles for this interview. And as I got in my car, in the garage, my first house I had ever owned, you know, remember I grew up in the housing project. So now I'm in a house and I got a car and a garage, okay? I got in that car, I turned the ignition on, I let the door up, and a little devil jumped on my shoulder and said, Bryan, why are you still wasting your time? You know they are not going to let you in. And they're not going to do that simply because you've got low test scores and you can't write a dissertation. What are you going to say to them to change their minds? And I said, oh, man. I sat there for about 2 minutes in that car, like, what am I going to say? And something told me there was nothing I could say. But boy, was there something I could show them. I got up, I went downstairs. I had a little office downstairs in the basement. And I grabbed, I kid you not, every paper I had written in Tennessee at UT Chattanooga, at West Virginia University in Morgantown, West Virginia, and at the University of Nebraska, where I had done either non-degree seeking work or my master's work or something like that. And I took every one of those papers and I put them in my briefcase, and we set out for 80 East from Kearney to Lincoln. I got up there and we did the small talk. We talked a little bit about football and this, that, and the other. And he asked me why I want to do a doctorate and all that kind of thing. And then finally he got to what I believe was the reason why I was invited, right? And he said, well, Bryan, I think you're a great guy and everything. And when he said that, I knew what was coming, right? I braced myself, I sat up, and I'm looking him right in the eyes. And he said, well, you know, we're happy that you are interested and whatnot, but I can't admit you. You'd never be able to write a dissertation. And, you know, it won't be fair to, you know, he's telling me it's not going to be fair to me to give me a chance. About this time, I'm teary-eyed and a little bit and what have you, because I keep hearing this thing over and over and over. I said, people keep telling me that. You know, it's almost like John Wick, but without the violence, right? You know, I said, you know, people keep telling me I can't write a dissertation. And so I pulled out those things. I said, these papers are from the University of Tennessee Masters of Education, Counseling, Community Counseling Program. These papers are from Dr. Richard Hartnett, Department Head of Teachers College, Higher Education Leadership Ph.D. program at West Virginia University. These papers are from Dr. Richard Hoover, former president of Hastings College and senior lecturer at the University of Nebraska. These papers are from Larry Douglas, former superintendent of Omaha Public Schools and department head at the University of Nebraska. All of these very credible, credentialed, experienced, authoritative people from 4 or 5 different states have said that I can write nothing but A's. straight A's. But you're telling me I can't write. Something's is wrong here. His name was Don Yearling. I said, something is wrong here, Dr. Erling, and it's not me. And he looked at all my papers and he said, you know, Bryan, these are pretty good. And I said, well, you know, I'm a good writer and I can do this work. All I need is an opportunity. And I said, I tell you what, not only am I a good candidate, but you don't have to give me an assistantship. I said, I got my own money. I can pay for, you know, my benefit for working for the state. I said, I can pay for it. You don't have to pay me anything or pay for my classes. I can pay you. And you keep saying that you want diversity in your program. Well, here's a young, tenacious Black man trying to get into your program that don't need any money. He just need an opportunity. Let me in, admit me. And he looked at me. He said, let me talk to a few people. I'll see if I can find somebody that would be willing to mentor you. And he called me a couple of weeks later and said that Dr. Richard Hoover would mentor me and that I was officially admitted to the program. And so I go through and I do all my work. I get to the comps and I pass the comps, and I had to do statistics to start the dissertation. And in order to do that, I had to sleep at a hostel for 5 weeks. And I don't know if you ever been to a hostel, but it's like a open barrack. Anybody can come in the middle of the night. You never know who you're sleeping next to. It could be Jeffrey Dahmer or something. It could be literally, it could be anybody that take the bed next to you. You never know. But that's what I had to do, right? And so I passed the statistics courses and started the dissertation. And my first draft of the dissertation, Dr. Hoover threw it in the trash. He said I'd never finish with that and that it'd take too long to try to get it done and all that kind of thing. And I thought about quitting, Tisha. I came home, I was about broke as broke could be. And while I was laying in the bed, about ready to quit, I looked up at that ceiling and something said, Bryan, these people tried to tell you you could not write a dissertation. Now you see what they're talking about, don't you? I was like, oh my God, they did say that, didn't they? And no sooner than that thought crossed my mind. I said, well, if I don't get back on that bicycle, right, then everything they said about me not being able to graduate is going to be true. And so I went to sleep that night and I woke up with a rejuvenated spirit, and I was determined to, get that dissertation written. And I just didn't know what about, but, I found the topic and got through.
The show is called Not Your Average Goat. And, you asked me about pro football earlier in this conversation, and GOAT does stand for greatest of all time. I'm a big football fan. I like sports in general. And so I named the show that because I wanted to bring on people who I think everyone else should know more about, but they just don't yet. And it's because they're quote unquote average. And so the people I bring on this show, I believe, are goats in one way or another. And so I like to close the show by asking you, who for you, or maybe it could even be like an experience that you've had, has been your goat or biggest motivation in driving you to where you are today?
My goats have been my grandmother, who's no longer with us. She passed February 13th, Super Bowl Sunday of 2022. And then my mother. And, my grandmother, as I said, everybody called her mom. She had some special magic in her heart and she could find a way to make you smile in the middle of a rainstorm or something like that. But my mother, being my goat, I didn't understand as a kid all that she had done or was doing for us. You know how you want McDonald's, right? You want some ice cream, or you want, some new shoes, or, you want any number of different things that kids want. And you couldn't always have it. And you didn't really understand why. Mama got you got $20, right? You got some money right there. You looking at it, and she got other things she need to do with it, electricity or telephone or whatever it is, rent, your food in the refrigerator, you name it. She washed dishes for 30 years, I bet you. And not only did she wash dishes, but she would walk 8 miles one way to cook dinner for this family in West Knoxville, make $15, $20 for cooking that dinner, and walk 8 miles home. Because she didn't have a car up until like 1992, sometime like that. That's a goat. And she did that especially for the purpose of taking care of her, three kids and 2 grandchildren at the time. She had two grandchildren in 89, and then by 91 there were 2 more. So that was by the 91 there'd be 4 grandkids. And she never complained. She never faulted anybody or complained about it or whatever. She just did it, And when you get Thanksgivings and other holidays and whatnot, we'd have a beautiful meal and that kind of stuff. And, as a kid, you just didn't know and didn't understand, or at least I didn't. I'm not speaking for all kids, because maybe there are some who did get it, who did understand. But yeah, that's a GOAT, no doubt. First ballot Hall of Famer.
That's definitely a goat. I've only ever walked 8 miles somewhere to go eat, not to cook someone else's food. That's incredible, that drive and that dedication to supporting her family. I love that. I am so grateful for the conversation we've had, and I'm excited for other people to hear it.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. This has been great.
Not Your Average Goat is produced and edited by yours truly, with music by Anton Blazov and Sergio Quadrado. All content is copyrighted and should not be reused, reproduced, or recreated without explicit consent. Please email nyagpodcast@gmail.com for questions.